Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is define energy and also define work. Energy is the capacity to do work, and work or to do work means to move something, whether it's a muscle or a molecule. And examples of physiological work could include things like pumping blood, building bigger molecules, or building molecules, like, say for instance, if we were taking amino acids and building proteins, or linking glucose molecules together in order to create glycogen, or breaking chemical bonds. Everything taking place in the body is a form of work. Now, let's define chemical energy. Chemical energy is potential energy stored in the bonds of molecules. So again, chemical energy is potential energy that is stored in the bonds of molecules. So let's define potential energy versus kinetic energy. Now, energy is broadly classified as those two things, potential or kinetic. Now, potential energy is contained in an object because of its position or internal state. Now, potential energy is not doing work, whereas kinetic energy, on the other hand, is the energy of motion, the energy that is doing work. So if you look at the two pictures that I've placed on the screen, on the left-hand side, there you have water behind the dam, and that water that's actually behind the dam has potential energy. And that's just simply because of its position. Now, if we open the gates and let the water flow through the dam, it has kinetic energy that can be tapped in order to generate electricity. Now, if you look at the screen, just like that water behind the dam, there are ions concentrated on one side of a membrane, and they have what we call potential energy that can be released by opening the gates in the membrane. Now, as ions flow through those gates, and what we mean by gates, we're talking about, say for instance, we're talking about protein channels or protein pumps. But that's what we mean by the gates. It says, as those ions flow through those gates, their kinetic energy can be tapped to create a nerve signal, or make a heartbeat, or make a muscle contract. Here in the photograph or picture, you see that we have these hydrogen ions that are concentrated on one side of the membrane. This is the membrane of a mitochondria, for example. And this portion, let's say for instance, if I drew a mitochondria where the hydrogen ions are concentrated, is in the area that's known as the intermembrane space. Okay, the inner area would be the matrix. Okay, so here this would also be the matrix. Okay, and as those hydrogen ions that are built up on one side, and you see them flowing through from the matrix to the intermembrane space, and they build up until we have a higher concentration gradient of hydrogen ions on one side of the membrane than we do the other. When they pass through the ATP synthase complex, which is this molecule that you see here, this entity that you see here, says it gives us the energy to take ADP plus inorganic phosphate and synthesize ATP. Boom, now we've made some energy simply from the kinetic energy that was generated as those protons flowed through the ATP synthase complex. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Now, There are three classes of chemical reactions that I want to talk about, and that's a decomposition reaction, the synthesis reaction, and the exchange. Decomposition, meaning that we're taking larger molecules and breaking them down into smaller molecules. Synthesis reactions, where we're taking smaller molecules and we're building up larger molecules. Exchange, we have two molecules in which we exchange the atoms in those molecules. Now, decomposition. We could call it a decomposition reactions. Let's go back. Decomposition reactions fit in the category of, say for instance, catabolism. I'm trying to grab a pen here. Here we go. It's being stubborn. Come on. It's being mean. Alright, there we go. Decomposition are also catabolic reactions. I will just continue to talk and try not to write anything else. These are catabolic reactions. So if we looked at the two types of metabolism, we have destructive form, which is catabolism, and we also have a constructive form, which is anabolism. Okay, and in this particular one that I have, where you see AB plus water yields A-H plus B-OH. The water is used in hydrolysis type reactions, and hydrolysis reactions are also called water splitting reactions. And in a water splitting reaction, you split water and you end up putting a hydrogen ion on one. So you can see if we split water, we'll split water into two entities, and that would be a hydrogen ion and a hydroxyl ion, and those two go on the two former whole molecules. That's how we split that bond. Another example, since my pen is not really cooperating, and I'm drawing maltose, which is a disaccharide. It's a sugar that's found or used for beer making. Now this is our disaccharide. It says if we add water in order to perform our hydrolysis reaction, it says we're going to split water, and what's going to happen in order to break this glycosidic bond is that we're going to put a hydrogen ion on one, and then we're going to put the hydroxyl ion on the other. So we're going to put a hydrogen ion, and then we're going to put a hydroxyl ion on the other portion of the bond in order to break those two apart. So what we'll end up getting is, I'm going to have to write going up the screen here, and that is, well actually I'll just do one on top of the other. But we're going to end up with this, and the oxygen, we'll put the hydrogen ion plus, if we look at this end of the molecule here, we'll put a whole hydroxyl group, which is here. Okay, and we just put a hydrogen on that one, and we end up with two separate molecules, whereas before we had this whole thing, which was a disaccharide, and we split it into two separate glucose molecules. Alright, now that we're past that, let's move on. Synthesis reactions. It says, in synthesis, it says for example, would be like performing the other part of metabolism, the constructive portion. When we take two separate molecules and we build something bigger. For example, if we were taking amino acids and joining them by peptide bonds and creating proteins, or if we take two glucose molecules, for example, and create something bigger and create maltose. If we keep linking those glucose molecules together, we can build something called glycogen. Glycogen is how we store excess glucose molecules from the bloodstream in our liver or in our muscles. But in order to create those larger molecules, we're going to perform something called a dehydration synthesis reaction. And the word dehydrate means to do what? Remove water. So in other words, if we took the two molecules above and one, and I'm just going to do these little simplified drawings because this is much easier. And it says if we remove water, if we take away a hydroxyl group and if we take away a hydrogen, H2O, that's going to make water. So it says following a dehydration synthesis reaction, we'll end up with something that looks like this. And that oxygen will form a bridge between the two former separate molecules. And bam, now we have maltose again, for example. Okay, and then finally, exchange reactions. In an exchange reaction, again, we said that's when we exchange two atoms. So you can look at the formula. It says A plus B plus C plus D gives us AC plus BD. Let's look at, say, for instance, when HCl enters the duodenum from the stomach. The pancreas will secrete, say for instance, sodium bicarbonate, which is NaHCO3. And what we end up making is a salt in order to neutralize the hydrochloric acid, okay, and that's NaCl plus we end up forming carbonic acid, okay? So let's move on and finish up with our types of metabolism. The two kinds of metabolism again, and I briefly talked about those in the last slide, are catabolism, which is our destructive form of metabolism, and then anabolism, which is our constructive form of metabolism. Now with catabolism, say for instance you've eaten a meal, you've got proteins, you've got carbohydrates. These molecules are too big to be absorbed, so they go through the digestive system and they're broken down into smaller molecules that can actually be absorbed. When we break those bonds that hold those large molecules together, so when a covalent bond is broken, it releases kinetic energy that had been stored within that bond, and that energy can perform work. So these are called exergonic reactions because exergonic reactions release energy. And then on the other hand, we've got anabolic reactions or anabolism. This is our constructive form. It takes energy to create a bond. So anabolism is considered what we call an uphill process. Therefore, generally, exergonic reactions are always coupled with energonic reactions. Cells must balance their energy budgets with these reactions that are producing energy, and with those that also need energy. So that concludes our short, brief discussion on energy and chemical reactions. If you have any more questions, you can contact me by email, or you may talk to your instructor. I hope you have a wonderful day.